Can I start by thanking all of the people who work in the protection of family, domestic and sexual violence across this country, some of whom we met today, others who we all meet all over Australia. And to say we value the work that you do, we know how incredibly challenging it is, and we know that you are often the point of contact for a woman fleeing domestic and family violence at the most critical time of her life. Thank you for the work that you do. We really value it. Today we're announcing a suite of new measures that build on the work that we have done in coalition in government. New measures amounting to $90 million for further initiatives for the prevention of family, domestic and sexual violence. And Michaelia Cash will go through some, Karen Little will go through others. But I first want to make this statement with respect to the $90 million of additional funding. It builds on the record women's safety funding of $3.5 billion that we saw the coalition deliver in government. Really, really important funding, because the scourge of family violence reaches into every corner of this country and into every cohort of Australian society. And every time we recommit with new funding, such as we are today, we make the statement that enough is enough. Because when you know that women are calling helplines every 4 minutes and police are responding to call-outs for domestic violence incidences every 6 minutes, you can see the scale of the problem. Almost one woman every week is killed by a current or former partner. So enough is enough. When we look around Australia and we see our beautiful country, we know that we have a great deal to protect. And the protection of women is critical and it is key. And while I appreciate the bipartisanship that the Labor Party and the Coalition have on this matter, and it's important that we do, we will always call out the government where they don't deliver on what they have promised. 3 years ago, Anthony Albanese promised to deliver 500 frontline family and domestic caseworkers. 500. And we meet those caseworkers every day, and we hear directly from the services, as we did this morning, every day. And when I hear that the numbers were not delivered in time, I know that women at critical periods of their lives, when they needed help, when they needed assistance, were not able to find that help. After 1 year, no new additional caseworkers had been delivered by this Anthony Albanese government. After 2 years, just a handful. And now at the end of the term, we still haven't seen the full 500 caseworkers delivered. I'll go on to the measures briefly and then I'll hand over to Senator Cash, who will talk about new offences under the Family Law Act and under the law. We're going to change some of the parameters of the leaving violence payment and the emergency safe places accommodation payment. These were two measures that we introduced in government that are really important, because we need flexibility in delivering that $5,000 emergency payment to women who are leaving and escaping violence. And we also need to accept that when we are supporting our women's shelters and our safe places, they need full flexibility when it comes to the work that they might want to do, updating the kitchen, introducing new rooms, making the accommodation absolutely fit for purpose. And Senator Little will talk about a call line, which of course is much needed when you consider the number of women who are reaching out, looking for help, and they desperately need that help to be made available to them. Women's financial security is entwined with their safety, and we want to see women who are financially secure and independent. And in a cost of living crisis, that's tough. So I do note today that in this cost of living crisis, many of our services across the country are indeed stretched, because it is women who are often most threatened when they're not financially independent. I'm now going to hand over to Senator Cash to go through some of the announcements more specifically.
Thank you, Susan. And it is fantastic to be here in Tasmania today in Hobart with the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton, and my colleagues to announce the measures in this incredibly important package. Part of our plan to get Australia back on track is to keep our communities safe. And a commitment to keeping our communities safe is to ensure that women and children who are fleeing domestic violence are kept safe. And that is what this additional $90 million, building on, as Susan said, what we did in government, is intended to do today. There are three measures in the Attorney-General's portfolio. The first is that we will invest and build a national domestic violence register. This is all about ensuring that our police and relevant agencies, including child protection agencies, including firearms agencies, have the relevant information that they need on a person's domestic violence convictions, so that if they need to make a decision in relation to that person, they have all of the information at hand so that the decision they make is an informed decision. At the moment, there is no national domestic violence register, which means here in Tasmania, for example, if any of the agencies or the police need to make a decision in terms of what they may have to do with a person, the information they have is only from Tasmania. What we are going to do is work with the states and territories to pull together the information they have so that at any given point in time, those police and those agencies across Australia have all of the information that they need. Knowledge is power, and we are going to ensure that our police have the knowledge that they need so that they can make the informed decisions. The second measure in the Attorney-General's portfolio is that we will create 2 new offences in the Criminal Code in Section 374. Those measures are intended to ensure that a person who uses, for example, a mobile phone or another computer device to make an intimate partner or family member fear for their safety, you will be able to be prosecuted under that offence. But also, we will create an offence that means if you are installing, for example, spyware to track someone, that will also become an offence under a Peter Dutton government. Enough is enough. The offences currently in the Criminal Code are not adequate to deal with instances of domestic and family violence, and we will ensure that they are. And the third measure is an incredibly practical measure. We will increase the threshold value of the assets under the priority property pool from $550,000 to $1.5 million. What does this mean? This was a measure that we implemented when we were in government. It allows families that do not have children's issues that needed to be settled, so they just have a property settlement, to get into a priority pool that ensures that they are facilitated as quickly as possible through the courts. The current value of the assets is $550,000. Clearly, in today's market, that is not enough. We will increase that asset value to $1.5 million, excluding superannuation. What that means is, if your assets are $1.5 million or less and you do not have issues in relation to children that needed to be worked through, you are put into this priority property pool, and literally, as quickly as possible, a settlement is reached. The program has already been evaluated when we were in government. It was highly successful. Over 90% of cases, 92% of cases who were in the priority property pool actually settled before a registrar without the need to go to court. We currently cover around 27% of all cases in the asset value pool. We are going to increase that to in excess of 82%. And we know, it is a fact, that the longer you stay in the system, the more at risk a woman becomes to being subjected to violence. This is something that when I was previously a minister, it was welcomed around Australia as a practical way of getting people through that court system as quickly as possible. So as I said today, it is wonderful to be here in Tasmania, but to be a part of this important announcement under a future Dutton government.
Yeah.
Thank you. As Shadow Minister for Child Protection and the Prevention of Family Violence, it's great to be here in Tasmania where, like the rest of Australia, you're experiencing an epidemic in family and domestic and sexual violence. It is really important that we focus our action on early intervention and prevention and de-escalation of crisis at the earliest opportunity. And when I look at all of the measures that we are announcing today, that essentially in a nutshell does those things. One of the initiatives is for those people, every 4 minutes in Queensland, somebody rings a helpline. We know that children ring helplines and those calls aren't answered. So what we are announcing today is we will fund the technology that will help and assist those calls to be answered that aren't answered. That gives greater confidence to Australians who are needing to reach out for help to actually get the help that they need, so that somebody can pick up the line in those triage services across the country. I've been told from the very many frontline services that I've visited that that's a crucial part of a response. That is getting help at the earliest opportunity, and when people finally pick up the phone and ask for help, somebody needs to be there to answer that call. It might be advice, it might be moving them to a safe place, but that initial contact they make is critical, that there is somebody there to respond to that. That's going to be really important in places, in rural communities, in remote communities, where access is always going to be a greater issue, but it's fantastic when you live in those places. This overcomes some of those barriers. The other part of this initiative is increasing the powers of the Domestic Violence Commissioner. She will have audit responsibilities. There are billions of dollars that go into investment in reducing family violence, domestic violence and sexual violence. We want to make sure that she can look into where the programs that were going to be delivered are delivered as they intended. And we heard an earlier example of the 500 workers. Nearly 2 years after that announcement, only 2 workers had actually been delivered, one of those in the electorate of the federal minister. It was not good enough. It is not good enough. Just like the rapid review, we heard a big response from the Prime Minister, a big announcement, but not a lot of action. He announced a rapid review. The rapid review was handed to him in September last year with recommendations, and yet most of the money will not roll until the 1st of July. It's simply not good enough to make an announcement and not have the action. So I'm very pleased to be here to talk about new funding in addition to the funding that's already out there, because that's what's required in this epidemic. Thank you.
Well said, Karen. Thank you very much. Look, it's great to be here today with Susan and with Michaelia and Karen, and great to be here with Susie Bauer as well. I want to say thank you very much to those that we were able to meet with this morning. Professionals, people working on the frontline services, confronting stories as you would expect, and a need for more support and assistance. Over the course of COVID, as you know, we had a particular focus on investing into services because people were having to stay at home. The whole family dynamic and household situation, particularly for victims of domestic violence, had changed quite dramatically, and we ramped up very significantly the amount that we were putting into services, and we made a deliberate decision to do that. That funding was done on a bipartisan basis, and as Susan pointed out before, most every measure in this space is supported on a bipartisan basis because everyone's accepting of the fact that the scourge of violence, of domestic violence, financial coercion, every aspect in this debate is just completely and utterly unacceptable in our society, and we should be doing everything together to try and defeat it and work toward better outcomes for individuals but for our country as well. As my colleagues have pointed out, this is a comprehensive package and it builds on an investment of $3.5 billion already in the space. We heard from one of the services this morning about the need to interact with 19 different funding streams coming in predominantly from the Commonwealth. And so how do we work together to identify ways in which we can provide more efficiency in that money flowing either into the base funding or into services without, the obvious full-time employees that are involved ultimately in administering all of that, writing the grant applications, et cetera, So I think there are better ways in which we can work with services as well, and we're dedicated to all of that. So finally, I just want to say thank you to all of the frontline service workers, not only those represented this morning but right across the country. This is a really gruelling area of practice, and for many people they burn out very quickly because it's confronting and it's life-changing for them in their own circumstances. And we need to do justice to the work that they're doing. And with our announcement today, I hope that we continue to put more support in place and send a very clear message that we don't accept violence against women, young girls, any Australian, and that's, I think, evidence today. Happy to take some questions.
Mr Dutton.
We'll start up this way. Yeah.
Mr Dutton, in relation to comments Dan Tehan made this morning on radio, he said that you'd be cutting skilled migration to 150,000 places per year. The current intake is 132,000, so are you proposing an increase to migration?
What we've said is that we're going to cut migration by 25% because we're going to cut it by 25% because the government has created a housing crisis through bringing 1 million people in over 2 years, which is unprecedented. So we're going to fix up.
Did he misspeak?
We're going to fix up Labor's mess, and we've been clear about what we do in year 1 and 2, where we reduce it by 25%. In years 3 and 4, we bring it back up. But we have to get Aussie kids into houses. We've also announced that we're going to ban for 2 years foreign buyers from competing with young Australians in purchasing those houses.
I
haven't seen the comments, but I'm just telling you.
Misspeak. Is it concerning to you that your pick for Immigration Minister doesn't appear to know the current migration settings?
Just saying I haven't seen the comments that have been made this morning. I'm telling you, in terms of our policy, a 25% cut's required because the government over a 5-year period is going to bring in about 1.8 million people. They always underestimate these figures, and the problem is that we don't have the houses for Australians. We have a great migration story in our country, but it needs to be a well-managed migration program, and the government's allowed it to get away. So that's our policy, and that's what we'll implement. Yes,
so was that answer then by Mr Tehan a mistake, and also was your answer yesterday on West Jerusalem a mistake?
No, on both.
Sorry, well, your office had to go and clarify it, so was it a mistake?
No, I'm happy to take it. Is that the question you want to ask? Sorry, Sure. Well, I've said yesterday that our policy hasn't changed and it won't change. I think the biggest debate for the Jewish community at the moment, as we saw in North Sydney yesterday, in the very important seat where this debate, not just for that Jewish community, but around the country. I mean, people feel absolutely devastated by the way that they have been exposed and hung out to dry, and the Jewish community in our country feels less safe after 3 years of the Albanese government. That's the reality, and that's the story that many Jewish Australians are happy to convey because they feel less safe in our country. And that's something that we're going to address, and we've been very clear in our support of the Jewish community in Australia. We're not supporting violence.
Yesterday, didn't you?
I'll answer that question. Yep.
Aware of social media posts by Labor's candidate for Dixon Ali France that have recently resurfaced. She's called you a monster. Are these? What is your reaction? Are these posts grounds for de-endorsement?
I haven't seen the comments. Yep.
When you said on Monday that you wouldn't repeal the electric vehicle tax break, did you say no because you weren't aware of the policy in question? And now that you have backflipped, can you confirm whether any repeal of Labor's EV tax break would be retrospective or not?
No, there's no change to the policy. What we said was that no, there's no change to the policy, and no, we've been very clear. We don't support a $14,000 tax on a Ford Ranger. We don't support a $12,000 tax on a Toyota Hilux.
I'm talking about the FBT.
I was asked about both of those issues, and that was the answer that I gave, and you referred to that. We're not going to support Labor's big tax on cars and utes. We've been clear about that, and we've been clear in relation to the policy on the EVs. Our policy hasn't changed.
Would it be retrospective, the repeal? With the people that have used it, would they face a tax increase?
It'll be prospective for us. Yeah.
Work is already underway to improve information sharing between state police about convicted domestic abusers. It's already a criminal offence to use a carriage service to menace or harass someone. So how is what you're proposing different to what Labor's already doing?
Well, in the first instance, there is no National Domestic Violence Register. It is as simple as that. The states do things differently. For example, here in Tasmania, they will shortly be introducing legislation to have a disclosure scheme here, the same as South Australia. But what we are proposing is for the first time a national register. I recall in discussions when I was the Minister for Women, for example, in relation to restraining orders, one of the huge issues there was if you crossed a state line, nobody else knew about it. And under the government that we were in at the time, we introduced for the first time ever the national recognition of those restraining orders. That has made a huge difference. So this is the first time this will be introduced. Peter and I discussed it at length, in particular given he was a police officer in Queensland. And as he said, you'd be restricted basically to the information in Queensland. People move around this big country. This is all about knowledge and ensuring that police and the relevant agencies have the knowledge and the information they need to make their decisions. In relation to the offences under the Criminal Code, one of the problems with the current offences is they're in relation to menace and harass. Women often cannot prove those offences when it comes to fearing for their safety. So we are going to have a specific offence that deals with, for the first time ever, women and children across this country who are having the perpetrator use a mobile device to actually have them fear for their lives. So fundamentally different to what is currently in the Criminal Code that does not work for women in this country.
Mr Dutton, if you're successful at the May 3 vote, what will you offer Donald Trump to try and secure a tariff carve-out, if not critical minerals?
We've been very clear about what this election is about, and it's about who has the strength of leadership to stand up for our interests, whether it's in relation to tariffs or if it's in relation to what we're seeing on the global markets at the moment. There could well be a global recession over the course of the next few years. There could be conflict in our region or further afield. And this election, in part, is about who do you trust to keep our country safe, who do you trust to manage the economy well, and who do you trust to stand up on the international stage for our best interests. And been clear, as we've discussed in the last few days, that I think there are many ways in which we can bring value to defence industry in our country, how we can deal with issues that are important to our partners. I note the government's made this announcement today in relation to critical minerals. It must be about the fifth time they've announced it. They keep reheating all of these old policies. They never implement anything, and Australians are suffering as a result of it. So,
what would you offer? Sorry, my question was, what would you offer a Trump administration to try and secure a carve-out?
Well, we've been clear in terms of our very strong view that Australia has so much more to contribute to the world in terms of our exports on defence manufacturing, and when you see the jobs that we were evidenced yesterday in the firm that we visited in WA, the opportunity here for us to grow as an export nation to the United States and elsewhere is obvious. So I think there are many ways in which we can try and build the relationship. But I think what people realise is that this election is between Anthony Albanese, who is promising to keep your prices higher for electricity and gas and for food. On the other hand, we're going to deliver a 25 cent a litre cut in tax on your fuel. We're going to deliver $1,200 of your money back to you by way of tax rebate. We're going to get home ownership, again, a reality for young Australians. We're going to keep our country safe, and we're going to make sure that we can manage the economy well so that we can bring costs down.
So are you saying that you'll leverage defence capabilities like AUKUS? Is that what you were saying by that?
I think I've made clear what I was saying about it.
I wasn't sure what you were saying. It wasn't clear to me.
We can clear it up later. I've gone through it a few times. So,
Mr Dutton, Northern Territory Police have arrested an 18-year-old after a supermarket owner was fatally stabbed. Is crime in the top end of high concern to you?
Well, crime in the top end has been a concern to us for a number of years. So when the government came into power, they provided no explanation at all as to why the cashless debit card was abolished, and for many of those communities they've seen a spike in violence which has been fuelled by alcohol, and that is a fact. You can speak to the police and the community service workers in Alice Springs or in Darwin. This is a significant concern. Now, we announced a $750 million crime package, as you know, it goes to helping communities become safer, because many communities in the Northern Territory, in Victoria, in New South Wales, talking to some of my colleagues in WA as well, it's the first issue that people raise. They're concerned about the rise of crime in their local communities. I want to make sure that we bring all of our experience together to make sure that we can reduce crime. I worked as a police officer for many years. Going into a domestic violence scene is confronting, and it's something that stays with you. To see kids on the floor screaming, you see blood splattered on the walls. These are horrible, horrible scenes. To see somebody going to work, to a place of work where they should feel safe, and they end up being stabbed to death, that is something that is condemned by every right-thinking Australian. So absolutely I want to make sure that we can keep communities safe, including in the Northern Territory. But as Labor's demonstrated at a CLP, at a territory level, compared to the CLP government, and at a federal level, we're prepared to make the tough decisions to keep our country safe. And I think these are tragic circumstances, as they've been reported, and we'll wait to see more detail.
Yesterday I asked you whether you would visit any of the nuclear power station sites you've proposed. You mentioned Hunter and Bunbury. Bunbury is an hour away from the Moodgee power station near Collie. Busselton, another stop on the campaign, is an hour and a half away. In the Hunter, the closest you got was Maitland, which is an hour away from Liddell power station. You've been able to visit 13 petrol stations so far during this campaign, and you haven't visited a single nuclear power site. Are you going to do one before polling day, or are you worried that this nuclear energy policy is losing you votes?
Well, a few things. One is we've visited the petrol stations, and I thank you for raising it again, because it's incredibly important. I want every Australian to hear that it's 25 cents a litre we're cutting off the fuel tax. So you fill up your tank of petrol or diesel, $14 back in your pocket. If you're a two-car family, how much back? $28, as you've heard us say at each of these fuel station visits. And not only that, it's $1,200 back by way of... I'll come to that part. So $28 for a two-car family. If you've got a uni student, and you're filling up his or her tank as well, that's another $14 that you're saving. $1,200 back by way of tax rebate. We're providing support to families, as we've demonstrated today, to keep our communities safer. We've been to 3 communities, including Collie, and we've been to those 3 communities.
Within the last 25 days.
Within those communities, we've listened to views. We've made our policy clear. Now, in relation to the other part of your question, what do I think about the nuclear policy? I think the nuclear policy gives our country the only chance of achieving net zero by 2050. That's what Keir Starmer believes in the United Kingdom. And our Prime Minister's out trying to win votes from Greens in inner-city Sydney and Melbourne. I have made a tough decision, our team's made a tough decision, not for political, vote-winning exercises, but for what is in our country's best interest in relation to nuclear power. It is a proven technology. It's accepted by the Prime Minister in relation to nuclear submarines. As you know, the Prime Minister lives not too far from Lucas Heights. He sleeps well at night. He wants to whisper under his breath about safety and all the rest of it, but he's never accepted the challenge for a debate in 6 months in relation to nuclear. We're going to bring the price of power down. We're going to bring the price of gas down. We're going to bring, therefore, the price of construction materials down. We're going to bring the price of groceries down. That's what we will do in government, and we've been very clear about it.
But you do actually have to win votes to get into government to make it happen. So you're accepting that.
We're on a pathway to do that, and I think there's a lot of good polling around at the moment that I've seen just overnight as well. And when you see the seats that Labor's out defending at the moment, I think there's quite a disparity where some of the published polling is compared to some of the party polling. Charles?
Mr. Dutton, I've got a question to the Deputy Leader. As we've heard Mr Dutton's opinion, do you think Australians feel safe right now?
Australians would feel a lot more safe with Peter Dutton as Prime Minister. And as they evaluate the 2 choices leading into this election, it is either Peter Dutton or Anthony Albanese. And Anthony Albanese is going to do a deal with the Greens, even though He looks you straight in the eye, you can see the lie in his eyes, because that deal is coming if he scrapes up enough votes to get there, but that's not what we're doing. We're not leaving anything on the field between now and election day when the polls close to make sure this man becomes the next Prime Minister of Australia and Australians will feel safe and secure in the most geopolitically challenging environment since World War II, but also in the face of this cost of living crisis that has implications for safety, both at the household and the community level.
Thank you. Speaker.
Mr Dutton, a couple of questions, sorry. One, just very briefly, do you support the Critical Minerals Reserve, yes or no?
We support, as we've said before, and we've said this right from the start, that we support making sure that the critical minerals output for our country is a very positive one. Now, we're not supporting the government's plan because it's just a reheat and a rehash and a re-announcement but no delivery. But critical minerals are absolutely essential for us and for our partners, and whether that looks like an offtake agreement or whether it looks like an agreement to stockpile or to work with the US and the UK and Japan, etc., we'll work all of that detail out in government. Don't fall for this re-announcement from Labor. They've had 3 years. The Prime Minister at the debate before last had no idea what he was talking about, even though he's made these announcements, and clearly they just haven't put the work in to get the deal done. And it's important because Australia does have a natural advantage when it comes to our natural resources, and this is another example of it.
Just another one on today's announcement. I mean, again, you just spoke about the Prime Minister having 3 years. You've had 3 years. You've left some of your strongest policies to be announced to the public after yesterday 500,000 people voted, today 1 million people have voted. Why should people vote for you when you give the air of a guy that's turned up not having turned his homework in on time?
Well, if you have a look at the policies that we've got that people will be considering, yes, you're right. We have invested significantly into keeping people safe, not just our $750 million keeping our communities safe and our suburbs safe, but the announcement that we make today as well. We've made a very significant announcement in relation to energy policy for an East Coast gas reserve, along with the promise to firm up renewables with nuclear power, which is zero emissions, 44% cheaper, and it'll keep the lights on. That is one of the most significant energy policies ever announced in our country's history, from government or opposition. And that's been out there for a long period of time. We took a position. In relation to nuclear, it's been out there for a long time. The government hasn't.
And you don't want to visit a site.
I'm very happy to talk with the Prime Minister.
Haven't you let your team down?
I'm very happy to talk with the Prime Minister about what is in our country's best interests. And what's in our country's best interests for families and for communities is to change the government, to get rid of a bad government and to install a new coalition government. We can clean up the economy so that we can get inflation down. We can deliver a 25 cent a litre cut to the fuel excise, so we help every family straight away with Labor's cost of living crisis. $1,200 back out of tax that you've paid to help you with the cost of living crisis. We're going to cut migration so that we can get young Australians back into housing. These are the major issues that families are concerned about, and that's exactly what we're delivering on. Mark?
Also on today's announcement, Mr Dutton, I'm sure Australian women will take whatever protections they can get, additional legal protections, but we've heard a lot of this. There have been so many announcements over so many years. There have been special national cabinet meetings, 2 of them, I think, in the past 18 months. Really noble words and legal protections, and yet we're still talking about a crisis and a scourge and an Australian woman being killed every 4 or 5 days. What's your message to Australian men? Obviously there's a cultural change that has to occur here. What is your message to Australian men about their responsibilities?
Well, Mark, my comments and my advice would be based on my own experience as a policeman and having seen the tragic circumstances of crime and violence in the home and in the community, and having worked in this space in home affairs, etc., for a long period of time. Australian men have to be the best role models that they can be, and we have to provide an example to our children, in particular our sons. We need to make sure that we don't walk past examples of violence, either in the workplace or in family settings or anywhere in the community. I think we have to have a much greater discussion in our community and our country about the violence of computer games and what our kids are consuming, absorbing at rapid rates, by the terabyte online, which is why we've championed the under 16 ban for social media. I think the social media companies deserve to be absolutely condemned for some of their poor conduct. I think that is a big part of the discussion that we need to have. So I want Australian men and Australian women to understand that, and to hear a very clear message from us that we're absolutely determined to work in good faith to see the best possible outcomes here. But you're right, this has been something that's bedevilled us as not just a country, but as a world for generations and generations. And the thing that upsets me most is that I think we're going backwards with the advent of social media, the violence and the normalised sexual conduct online through pornography sites, etc., that young boys in particular, but others are absorbing. And I think we have to have a mature conversation as a country about that. And I'm very willing to lead that conversation because I want to make sure that we're a safer society.
National summit of some description, or what are you suggesting?
I think listening more intently to some of the services that we spoke to this morning, who I think feel the frustration, they're the ones with the lived experience and understanding the nuances. And look, where human conduct is a factor, it's difficult, as Michaelia pointed out, to settle matters in the family court. A lot of women feel that they can't leave a relationship because of the financial realities, and matters are bogged down through legal process in the family court. One party tries to exhaust the funds of the others. Look, at many levels, you can have a summit, you can bring good people together. Ultimately, what we need to have is goodwill and a capacity to deliver change, and I think we must.
Dutton, I want to refer you to comments by Wayne Swan this morning in relation to your defence announcements.
So it's all going so well until you mentioned Wayne Swan. It's a depressing note.
He said that we don't think that amount of spending is needed. We've got our increases in the budget. We're working our way on those. We inherited a whole wish list from the coalition, which was underfunded. Can I get your response to that about whether that amount of spending is needed for defence?
Well, of course it's needed, and this just is a window into the true discussion behind the scenes in Labor. They don't support our defence budget. They don't support the men and women in uniform by pulling $80 billion out of defence. And as we know, when Wayne Swan was the senior minister, money was ripped out of defence to the lowest level since 1939. That's what a Labor government does. They pull money out of defence, and we've proposed a very significant investment into defence because we do live in uncertain times. There's no sense pretending that from a position of weakness we can maintain peace and stability in our region or project strength to deter any act of aggression against us. And that's why I think Wayne Swan just belled the cat. They don't have any interest in investing more into defence, and that's why there was no extra money in the budget, and it's why Richard Marles is racing off around the world playing golf instead of standing up for our best interests, particularly in such an important portfolio.
I just looked at the transcript from the question Michael asked on Monday about FBT. It was strictly related to FBT, not the ute tax issue. So is it the case that there actually is confusion on whether you supported that policy and a decision was made this week? And if so, what does that say about the preparedness of your economic team, Jane Hume and Angus? Will they keep their jobs after the election, most of it?
I think the other day the Prime Minister responded, I think, to Latika and said, I don't accept the premise of the question. And then you were happy for him just to move on. But of course, I won't do. And you just accepted it and you let him move on. But I won't do that to you, Paul. I won't do that. There's been no policy change, no discussion about that policy this week. It's been long-standing since we took the decision. I answered the question in relation to the ute tax, and I've been very clear in relation to our position on the ute tax. In relation to the FBT issue, our policy has not changed since it was since we first announced our position. In relation to the ute tax issue, which I think Australians are only starting to hear, I think it's worth restating because I don't support Anthony Albanese's $14,000 tax whack on tradies and Australians who want to go and buy a Ford Ranger or a Toyota Hilux.
But why then, if your comments about not touching the arrangements were misunderstood by us on the day, why did your team, for example, not clear it up and say, no, we actually do support reversing the EV policy?
Well, I just don't accept the premise of your question. So, next one.
I don't know what you mean. I actually don't know what you mean by that.
Well, I don't know what you mean by your question. I think I've stated it clearly, Paul. So I think we're better off just to accept that we have a difference of opinion. There's been no change. There's no change to the policy.
The question was very clear. I read the transcript just now,
and I've read my response, and the response was very clear. No change to our policy, and we're not going to support the ute tax. And I've read the transcript myself as well. So hence the reason. Well, but my response was in relation to the ute tax. Sometimes you ask the question. We don't always respond exactly how you would want us to, which you see sometimes in question time as well when we ask a question of the government. We do our best to answer faithfully according to word by word the question you've asked. But in relation to this issue, the whole conspiracy about whether there's been a change of policy this week, it's just wrong. And Labor might be pushing that out. Our position hasn't changed since we made the announcement. And importantly, in relation to the ute and car tax, we're going to abolish it. So if you vote for Anthony Albanese, your Ford Ranger is going up by $14,000. If you vote for us, it's not going to go up by $14,000. We'll cut it. And as a bonus to you as well, and I'll just make this point, we're going to cut your fuel by 25 cents a litre. And that will be a big win for somebody who's driving a Ford Ranger. I don't know whether you drive a Ford Ranger, but probably an 80-litre tank, you could save lots. And that would make you more inclined to support us at the election, I'm sure.
Mr Dutton, there's 3,800 Commonwealth public servants living and working in Hobart. There's about 500 more than in 2022. How many of those jobs would you like to see go to reach your 41,000 target?
None. We've been clear about that.
You have a policy of reducing the public service by 41,000 places.
In Canberra, we're not reducing the public service.
So only in Canberra.
Been very clear about that from day one. Yeah.
Are you still banking the cost in on that, Mr Dutton?
Yes, we are.
At the same number as you...
Well, we'll provide that. We've done work with the PBR in relation to it.
So back office staff living and working in Hobart?
The answer is none. Yeah. I know, I've heard Labor Scare campaign, and you've had Murray Watt out there, the chief attack dog, who's now just become a parody and an embarrassment, and I think he's now been put back into hibernation. So no.
41,000 jobs in Canberra. That's a huge amount of the...
We've been very clear about that. Yes. Just make this point. Some of those positions, of course, haven't even been filled yet, as well. So they're projected numbers and
savings offered as well.
Well, they're projected numbers. They're not even positions yet. Some of which have been filled.
Well, then how many real positions would you cut? How many real positions would you cut, Mr Dutton?
Yes, ma'am.
A double header, Mr Dutton. Just on this domestic and family violence announcement firstly, how confident are you that this package will help a state like Tasmania that has quite a dispersed population outside of the main townships of Hobart and Launceston? As we heard, it can be difficult to access frontline support services in regional areas. How confident are you that this package will see a benefit and make a difference in Tasmania? My second question, Mr Dutton, on the hydrogen production tax incentive, you've announced that you would cut that. Able Energy, which is the proponent of the $1.7 billion Bell Bay Power Fuels project in northern Tasmania, has raised concerns that if it doesn't get that federal funding, that the project could potentially be at risk. Will you guarantee funding for that project in some other way? And we know that Susie Bowers, of course, a strong advocate for renewable energy in Tasmania. Are you both united on a solution for that project?
Well, just in relation to the last part, I think there have been some discussions with the company. We're certainly happy to have discussions with the company. We strongly support renewable energy, and we've been clear about that. We invested in it heavily, including hydrogen and including hydro projects and batteries, etc., when we were in government. The problem with the Labor Party's policy, and where it'll have an impact here in Tasmania as well, is that they don't have the ability to firm up, and that's the problem they've got. Everyone would like to see the batteries last for longer, but they don't. And so our policy is around reducing the cost of gas by 23%, which is going to have a big impact and a positive impact across sectors, and we'll deal with that. And we'll have. I'm very happy to have a conversation with the company because we want to see investment go ahead in Tasmania. But we've been clear.
Where funding come from if you're going to cut that?
We're happy to have a discussion with the company, but we've been clear in relation to that program and in terms of our policies in relation to those issues. They haven't changed.
And just on my first question, there was a little bit in that.
So there was the point I'd make in relation to the first question is that, and speaking with the Minister and some of the participants before, there's a particular issue in Tasmania around per capita funding, and that makes it difficult. I'm very sympathetic to that argument. Karen pointed out the anomalies in the Northern Territory as well, just given population and the disbursement. So we're very happy to look at at those specific issues and how we can provide support. But what we announced today will help keep Tasmanian families and women and children in particular safe. and safer than they otherwise would have been. There's always work to do, and that's part of our plan of making our country safe, and I'm very proud of what we've announced today.
Yeah, you're here talking about the safety of women. Does that include trans women? Do you think trans women are women? And what protections will you afford them if you are
we had a discussion about gender as well this morning, which was an important discussion also, and we can provide support through programs as we're seeing now. And there was a discussion about early intervention and also education at a younger age about violence and respect for people regardless of their gender. And we're happy to continue that discussion that we had this morning.
But do you think trans women are women?
Well, a woman and gender is defined, and there was reference made the other day to a case in the United Kingdom. But I think a woman is defined as an adult female, and that's the definition. Now, in terms of what is at stake at this election, these are important issues that you raise. But the issues that people will be deciding on at this election, which I think are particularly important to Tasmanians and others, is cost of living, housing, and also community safety and national safety. And they're the issues that we've concentrated on. And at this election, that's what we'll be taking to the election.
Bridget Archer did sign an election pledge against any trans hate during the election campaign. Claire Chandler has been asked whether she thinks trans women are women, and she says that they are an adult woman, as you did, but John O'Daniam says biological woman. Do you think a trans woman is a woman, or do you think a woman is a biologically born female woman?
I've answered that question.
I don't think you have answered that question. Just a yes or a no. A biological woman?
I've given you my response.
Or a trans woman? Is a trans woman a woman?
Sorry, just on domestic violence too,
Yes.
Acknowledging that going through the courts is a massive, massive hill to
Yes.
climb for a number of reasons. Most men who commit domestic violence won't be convicted partially for that reason, and the whole host of factors that go into that. Are we risking focusing on a small cohort of convicted perpetrators against the scale of the problem? And related to that, acknowledging that the register isn't going to be publicly available, what are we doing to furnish women with more information and protections, hopefully before they're victimised?
Okay, I'll ask.
It's a very